friends, Jewel back with another super cool astrology video, and I wanted to talk about the inconjunction between the Sun and Pluto. What happens when we have this very tense aspect in the birth chart? So the birth chart is very much a map of our early understandings and goings on in the world and how we reacted to that. There's really nothing mystical about the birth chart. It's really a map of the gravity that was in place when we were born and how we respond to that, because we are of the universe. We're made of elements of the universe. That's where we come from. So we very much respond to the forces around us, and so we do that in very pointed ways when we have this particular inconjunction, because there is so much unconscious motivation going on behind this one. So this inconjunction really forces a certain amount of unconscious exposure at any cost. The areas of their behavior and identities that are blocked from view are very much conscious parts of them, ways that they're actually behaving and acting out. More so than other people who are very much unaware of what they don't know that they don't know. These people are more unaware of what they consciously are actually doing. So they don't recognize that they have very unconsciously driven behavior patterns. These people are not easily controlled, but you have to look at the sun and the strength of the sun, because they can go back and forth sometimes. You can see people that have this in their charts that have some very codependent behavior, or that struggle with power struggles in their lives and in their relationships. But usually and typically, these are pretty powerful people. They will go back and forth because they're learning that. They don't understand that. They're in the process of uncovering that and exposing that to themselves. So some of them will go through this process of being victims. So their expression of their own unconscious stuff is very much coming to light to them with this one. Because a lot of the repressed stuff that they're dealing with, the things that they don't readily see, because they put that, because that's what Pluto represents, is the things that we don't deal with. We stuff them, we repress them, we keep them in a place where we think it's well controlled there, but ultimately it's not. It actually controls us. And Pluto is about our deepest attachments and investments when it comes to what other people are about or what they can offer. And so their repressed crap really distills into this soup of self-hatred, and they are acting from that inner volcano a lot of the times. So what's really at the root of this one? What was going on in the early life is that there was a male figure that had an inappropriate hold somehow. It was either too much or it was too little. Sometimes it was, you couldn't predict it. So what they do is, now as adults, they are trying to dethrone the king, you should say. They're trying to dethrone the father. So they want to be able to do away with the powers that be, is the actual unconscious process that is behind all of this. And so self-sabotage is extremely prevalent with this aspect, because that is one of the best ways that they can put themselves in a position where they then have to dethrone this person, or they have to prove this person wrong, or they have to escape from this person's hold and somehow, or this organization's hold, or this government's hold, or this belief system's hold. So it's interesting how this, comes from a very pointed place, but it very much bleeds out very, very largely to the larger scope of what is going on in their life. They identify with being pushed around or pushing around. You want to look at the sun, and sometimes it's both on the same day with this particular inconjunction. The sign of the sun is actually important too. If it's coming through a strong sign or a weak sign, you want to consider that too. There is an essential unconscious unworthiness that is going on here. And it translates to exhibiting these slave types of behaviors that they then, want to rise up and react against or do away with. These systems that are keeping them or them and others around them down. So their unworthiness makes their egos and their identities very touchy. They are on the front lines, and they often throw the first punch when it comes to the reactions that they get from other people. So they would not agree with that statement. They would very much see it as they have to defend themselves against what's coming at them. They don't largely see themselves as Plutonic. That is something that is very hidden from them, and they will argue against being argumentative or against being defensive. So, very much with this inconjunction, because the sun represents our concept of our will, and Mars as well, it's our action-oriented will. The sun is our will of being, or of the ego, or of how we want to be appreciated. They're under this belief that they don't somehow have free will, or they can't understand the concept of free will as being healthy or helpful. So that's very paradoxical. It's very much a paradox to the fact that they also believe in their own personal power. So I'm just going to plug my battery in here because Pluto represents power, doesn't it? That's really appropriate. So it's a process for them of uncovering their free will or exposing their free will through a process of filtering through their unconscious crap that's really driving their lives more than most people, because they're existing in that more than they are in the conscious processes of their lives. So, free will is something that they typically obsess over or study, or is a life theme for them. It's very important that they figure that out, because that is really part of the labyrinth of their life, is how to use that or apply that in a way that they understand. Now, something that's really important to understand about this inconjunction and all aspects between Sun and Pluto and Jupiter and Pluto as well, hard aspects, is that some of these people can be some pretty tough or rough characters. They have experienced some difficulties that then show up as indulging in some behaviors or activities that other people would consider to be immoral. So you could say some traditionally amoral people have these aspects. And There goes my light again. You know, I do something about that, but I honestly just really don't care because these are informational videos. And I know I'm supposed to care about my editing and all of that and really spend a lot of time with that, but you could just turn off the video and listen to this for all I care. So it's a process for them of experiencing a moment of vulnerability, because the I am, the true I am, the real you, the universe, whatever you want to call it, that interconnected whole, soul, spirit, the higher self, that doesn't have any judgment about who it wakes up in. That only requires a moment of vulnerability. And people that have this in conjunction actually do have that ability. They do. They can be open to the unconscious or the esoteric in ways that the rest of us don't really understand because they live so much in the unconscious soup in general. So they're comfortable with it. Receding from that into the true self is something that we can do with this in conjunction. Easier than other people, but it's only after usually a process of detachment, extreme self-knowing, extreme self-consciousness. So although the higher self can wake up in some pretty immoral characters or some people that have some behaviors that are frankly society would not agree with, or even some violent behaviors, violent reactions. The self doesn't really care about that because our behavior, once we become self-aware, once the self really wakes up, it really follows that. And it is a connection to self that instills peace, that instills balance, that has you recede from the ego and the being so connected to your concept of self, which is the birth chart and your identity. When we become really self-aware, self-conscious, it is a process then of not being somebody that acts out in ways that are not peaceful or that create, karma or action, resistance, things of that nature. So this is one where the non-self-awareness was really the cause of the combat and resistance and the difficulties that they see in their life. And when they have that moment of vulnerability, when they can really recede from their concept of what they are, which is generally filled with a lot of self-hatred and extreme feelings of unworthiness. And when they can, let that go, then they have this way of being this very, they become an authority on suffering, how to rise above suffering. And they have this very quietly, powerfully peaceful way about them. So it's a really fascinating aspect to have. And they do tend to push their physical limits, and they can invite a certain amount of violence or threats into their lives due to their provocative behavior or ways. People can react to them in very extreme ways. And there can be a need for them to feel like they need to physically hide really, really commonly. And they can see that as, coming from the outside world. But if you dig deeper, there is a thread here that you can follow back to their behavior, the reaction to that behavior, because they do have that way of throwing the first punch, because they have that expectation that they are already not deserving or not in a place of being given full measure, and so they feel like they have to come out fighting when they, when we're coming from that place. And then, when they can have that, that higher connection to oneness, then it takes the sting out of their point of view. So it's a powerful aspect to have, although typically they start out as feeling powerless or going back and forth between powerful and powerless until they can really solve this paradox of willfully asserting their ways and not understanding free will, or appreciating free will, or wanting to get to the root of free will. So it's really fascinating. These people do tend to be spiritual atheists. They actually have a high degree of esoteric understanding, and in an otherwise very more left-brained, rational chart, they can also have this intuitive understanding, or intuitive way of thinking, or a way of grasping at the unseen, or at something more. So psychics will have this, as well as scientists. It really depends on the overall chart pattern, which way, somebody generally leans, but this one opens up the ability to access higher realms, but it's that vulnerability that is really the key to doing that. Being able to say, there are some things that can't be known. And I know other astrologers don't like that. They don't want to say that, but there are some things that cannot be known. And there are some things that don't need to be known. And when we can know that and admit that and be comfortable with that, then paradoxically, everything can become known. And I know it's weird, but people with this in conjunction, they can actually come to a place where they can understand what I mean by that. So, happy hunting. And you'll know you solved this in conjunction when you aren't hunting anymore. And you'll know what I'm talking about when you get to that place. So, I hope this was helpful. If it was, please subscribe to my channel. You can find me on the internet at truthandaspectastrology.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Truth and Aspect Astrology. Yes, I do private consultation, and I'll be back super soon. Bye.